Welcome to the Studio B podcast. Today we're going to be discussing something very important, which is understanding UBC AI guidelines. We're hoping that this is going to help you to know how to use AI safely at UBC and in life in general. So my name is Eduardo. I'm the Learning Technology Specialist here at LDDI in the Faculty of Education. Guys, please introduce yourselves.
Hi there, my name's Bremen, and I'm a Learning Technology Rover here at LDDI as well.
Hi, my name's Reed, and I'm a Technology and Innovation Assistant here at LDDI.
Great. We would like to start with a land acknowledgement, and Reed is going to do that for us.
Yeah, so we'd like to acknowledge that we operate upon the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh-speaking nations. And as we engage with these emerging technologies, especially AI, we'd like to recognize the importance of doing so in ways that are mindful, sustainable, and just, and focus on sustainability and land preservation when it comes to operating upon these traditional lands.
Great. Thank you, Reed. So a couple of notes to the audience. First of all, please know that we're going to have timestamps in the YouTube description, the video description, so you can find the sections that are most relevant to you. We're also going to have relevant links in the description, meaning we're going to be referring to some websites, some articles, and also we're going to have some resources. You'll be able to find all of that in the video description. And finally, we invite you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with your community, because we believe this is going to be very helpful to you. Okay, so let's get started. I think it's fair to say that AI is here to stay, right? So. Yeah, and AI is really changing the way we work. It happens so fast, but now everyone seems to be diving into it. And the problem is that many times we do not know how to use it safely because this fast way in which it appeared in the world. And we're using it, but we might be making some mistakes or not doing things ethically. Definitely. And this can create a sense of anxiety among people. We have seen that in the workshops that we have done, and also even in our own use. We're not really sure if we're using it correctly. And I think this is a question that a lot of people have on their minds. So we wanted to create this podcast episode to address that and to present to you these frameworks, these policies that will help you to use AI in a safe, ethical, and rightful way. So, let's talk about that apprehension factor. A lot of people have this uncertainty when it comes to using AI. How should I use it? Am I using it right? And I found here some interesting data from a Business Insider article. So they surveyed 48,000 people across 47 countries.
Wow,
okay?
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and they found that 58% of them, of workers, are using AI intentionally. Okay? Now, however, 57% of them hide their AI use from employers.
Oh, interesting.
That already points to some sense of guilt.
Yeah.
And some people feel like that. Oh, it's too easy. Maybe I shouldn't be using it.
That's surprising.
Yeah. Then 66% don't bother checking AI outputs for accuracy.
Wow.
That's a big problem.
Yeah,
too.
that's very problematic.
It's pretty scary.
Yeah. Then 48% have uploaded corporate data to public AI tools, and probably as well educational data. So this is a really critical issue. And 56% of them admit making mistakes because of AI. So this really exposes the issues around transparency, trust, misuse. And this is precisely what is creating this sense of anxiety. So how can we overcome this? This is the question, right? First of all, we need to know that this is happening because there is a training gap or a knowledge gap. It happened so quick. AI came so fast and people started using it without getting the literacy that is needed, without getting the understanding of what is right usage of AI. So another survey that I found here from Livewire found that 74% of employees use AI tools regularly. And I think that is fair to say. We've been using it more and more. Yet, only 33% have received any formal training.
Wow, less than half.
Yeah, they just jumped into the boat without knowing the repercussions, right? And this is precisely what creates misuse, privacy lapses, and just problematic outputs. So, This is where policies come in, because they can help us to know how to use the technologies that appear in our society in the best way. And we have found that the UBC generative AI guidance is a great example. It has a lot of principles, guidelines, academic integrity rules, and training resources for staff and students that will help us to use AI the best way possible. So we want to discuss that with you. We want to share that with you, and it's going to help you to dive into AI usage in the best way. So now we're going to dive into two sections. First, we're going to discuss UBC privacy guidelines with Reid, and then we're going to talk about the guidelines for interacting with AI, and Bremen is going to help us with that. So Reid, let's get started. What are the current UBC privacy guidelines?
Yeah, great question. So there's a lot of information out there, and UBC has basically boiled down their guidance into two large websites, UBC's GenAI website and UBC Privacy Matters Privacy Guidelines website. So we're going to look at both of those. So UBC Privacy Matters website has basically summarized how the use of technology tools at UBC should be approached in terms of a privacy and security standpoint. And for AI, they basically break down their recommendations into two categories. First, the registration aspect. So when you are registering for the tool, what tool are you choosing? And then how are you going about agreeing to privacy terms with that tool? And then secondly is the information you're actually providing to AI tools. So first of all, they recommend that when you're choosing a tool, you choose a privacy impact assess tool. And we're going to get into what a privacy impact assessment is and what it means. And then if you're not choosing a privacy impact assess tool, you want to make sure that you are sharing your contact information that isn't confidential. So this means not reusing your CWL, username, or password, and not reusing any confidential login that might tie to a service that is protected by UBC privacy. And then also this means reading through the terms of service and privacy agreement. This is a big one. I always find myself signing up for a website and just checking that little box saying I agree. But when you're using it, especially in an educational and professional context, you want to make sure, and we're going to get into this, that you are accountable for not only the service, but what the service might do with your data. Because at the end of the day, when you feed AI data, you are responsible. You were the one responsible for doing that, not the company.
And this applies to UBC-approved tools and non-UBC-approved tools.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that the data you're sharing with the tool is safe. And that leads into the second section, which is that you want to make sure that if you're using these tools that you're not sharing sensitive information. Now, you might be thinking, what is
sensitive information?
What is sensitive information in the first place? Right. Well, UBC's information security standard actually has a security classification model for any digital information that exists. And they've basically broken it down into 4 categories. So all information falls under low, medium, high, or very high risk information. So examples of low risk information is something that would cause very minimal harm if disclosed. So this could be maybe like a publicly available employee name, or information that's posted on the UBC website already, or research that has been publicly published. So anything that is already on the internet and publicly available, but that does have ties to UBC, this is considered low risk information. Then there's medium risk information. Medium risk is something that is not necessarily technically protected by law or industry regulation, but could be used for destruction or cause harm to UBC if released. So this is definitely something that we need to be cautious about using. This includes proprietary information by a third party or by a student. This includes restricted library journals, confidential records, information that might allow somebody to harm the security of an individual, and anything proprietary in nature. So like essays, things that were produced that if given away or became public could cause harm to somebody. Then there's high and very high risk information. So this is when these types of information are things that you should be very careful about using. So high risk information includes things such as student's home address, student's full face photographic image, but also things like a student's name, a student ID, and even a student's grades are all things that are considered high risk and protected by law. And then lastly, very high risk information. This is information that must be protected, and unauthorized use could cause significant harm. So things like the social insurance number, government identity cards, things like that. And you can see all of this in the table that that is on your screen, and also will be linked in the description below.
Yeah, so this will be a resource that people can access to make sure that they follow these guidelines.
Exactly. And is there ever a time when it's okay to be inputting high or very high risk information with an AI tool? Because I can see a world where, you accidentally let some of these things slip.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And this is kind of the whole guidance around UBC's privacy matters team is basically what type of information can you use when. So right now, UBC Privacy Matters does not approve the use of high or very high risk information with any AI tool. This includes the tools that I'm about to show you that have been approved.
So even approved tools, this is a no-go.
Even approved tools do not allow you to use high and very high risk information. And that is something that's pretty important to know.
Yeah,
so
that's important to know because people might think, oh, it's approved by UBC. I can put any information in.
Exactly. Yeah. And we're going to show you an example of something of an email that somebody might copy paste into ChatGPT that includes some of this really sensitive information that you might miss. So yeah, but when it comes to classifying which information can be used with which tools, low risk information is typically approved for use with any AI tool, and medium risk information is approved for use with tools as long as the medium risk information is technically publicly available. So when it comes to inputting information into any AI tool, you want to make sure that you're aware that any information you put into that text box is automatically public domain. So it belongs to the corporation, it belongs to their model, they use it to train their data. And you want to be really careful that when you are inputting things into that really nice looking text box that looks so inviting, it actually is property of the company and the response as well.
So it sounds like even for that medium risk stuff, which is approved for these PIA privacy impact assessment approved tools, there's still like a gray area where you really need to exercise your best judgment in addition to following guidelines.
Exactly. And you always want to err on the side of caution. And so when it comes to choosing which tool to use, UBC Privacy Matters has also made guidelines around that. So UBC Privacy Matters does privacy impact assessments on a variety of different online tools that we use all the time at UBC. And what will happen is a member of the UBC community or the UBC faculty or student will come to UBC Privacy Matters and tell them, hey, I'm using this tool and I would love it if you could check it out and implement it in the university. Then UBC Privacy Matters will look at the tool and they will do an in-depth dive into where is the data being stored, how is the data being used, how is this tool storing privacy, how is the privacy policy working, how can we work with this tool, work with the company to make sure that when UBC users are using this tool in an official setting, it's safe and secure. Like, is the data being stored in Canada, internationally, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, Zoom, which is a tool we use really frequently, somebody in the UBC community approached UBC Privacy Matters back before COVID happened and asked them, hey, we use this tool. We think it's useful. Could you take a look into it? And what UBC Privacy Matters does is they look at the privacy policy. Where's the data being stored? Is it being stored in Canada or internationally? And they look at what features are deemed as privacy risks. So if you use UBC's Zoom tool, you'll notice that a few features are turned off, like they're storing the data on the cloud and recording to the cloud. And this is because UBC Privacy Matters deems these as a security risk. But now Zoom is approved for use with high and very high information. So you're allowed to talk about those informations on a call because UBC Privacy Matters deems it safe.
And this is not just for AI tools. It's for any digital tool that we
exactly.
are
So like
looking.
Zoom or like Microsoft Word or any online tool that you use. And in the link below, we'll include a link to all the privacy impact assess tools, including the AI and non-AI tools.
Yeah, it seems like that would be important because it sounds like there's different guidelines for what types of information can be used depending on the tool. So there's no one size fits all.
Exactly. And it's really variable when it comes to AI.
Yeah. And also how you use it, because I learned that the PIA is done not on the tool itself, but how you're using the tool. So they always need to know, like, okay, you want to use this tool, but how are you using it exactly? What's the context?
Exactly. And that's especially true when it comes to AI. So you might be asking, which AI tools are PIA approved? Which ones have been privacy impact assessed? And the answer is no AI tool is 100% approved yet. So all of these tools are currently undergoing approval, and some of them have interim reports that have been issued. And all of this information, we'd like to point out all of this information is valid as of August of 2025. So by the time you're watching this video, this information could have changed, and it changes very often. ChatGPT, as of this video's release, has only been up for 2 to 3 weeks.
ChatGPT 5, yeah.
Sorry, ChatGPT 5, yeah. And so all of these tools are constantly changing, and so is the guidance. So in the link below, we're going to have a link with the PIA-approved tools and the PIA-approved AI tools specifically that are most recent to you. But as of August, the current tools that have been initially approved are Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT 4o Mini, and Zoom AI Companion and Teams Premium. So Microsoft Copilot, the first one, is Microsoft's proprietary AI large language model. So this one is a GPT. It's able to respond to text-based questions a lot like ChatGPT. And UBC has approved this for use as long as you are logged in with your ubc.ca account. And if you are logged in with your official UBC email, they've actually disabled the feature where they store where Microsoft is able to use your data to train their models. So if you're logged in with your account, you are allowed to use up to medium risk data because they aren't allowed to use your data to train their models.
But they still store the data.
But they will still store the data.
Hence why you can't use the high and very high risk.
Exactly. Yes.
They just cannot use it for training purposes.
No, exactly. And it's considered safe and you are able to use it in more official university contexts. And we'll talk about what is an official context. And then the next one also interim report has been issued for ChatGPT 4o Mini. So this is a specific model of ChatGPT. This model is the only model that has been approved. So not ChatGPT 3, not ChatGPT 5, not ChatGPT 4o, just 4o Mini. So when you go to ChatGPT's website and you do not log in with any username and any password, and it is completely anonymous, ChatGPT, this is the default model. It will be ChatGPT 4o Mini, and this is the only use case in which you are allowed to use it for a professional setting. So if you are logged in or you're using ChatGPT 5 or you're not sure which model you're using, then err on the side of caution and try not to put any sensitive information into it. And that should go without saying that any sensitive information that you think might be a security risk, always err on the side of caution. We recommend caution. And then the other two tools that have been initially approved or are undergoing approval are Zoom AI Companion and Teams Premium. So AI Companion for Zoom is currently initially approved and is in beta testing. So that's going to start being rolled out. It includes features like automatic captioning, meeting summary. So that's pretty useful. And then also Teams Premium is currently in progress. So that one hasn't been approved yet, but this is more AI features that are congruent with the Microsoft platform. So with all of these tools that are out there, the PIA ones, the non-PIA ones, you might be thinking, when do I really need to use a privacy impact assess tool? I use Claude to check my grammar all the time. Do I have to switch to Microsoft Copilot? And the short answer is no. And you only need to use a privacy impact assess tool when you're dealing with certain types of information or certain scenarios. And on UBC Privacy Matters website, they've outlined a few specific scenarios in which that you must require a privacy impact assess tool. So, as I mentioned, you must use a privacy impact assess tool if you're dealing with high or very high risk information, and not including the AI tools. So, if you're dealing with high or very high risk information, it needs to be an explicitly UBC tool. So UBC has approved, if you're storing it on an Excel sheet or a Microsoft Word, those are approved tools to store sensitive information. Not any AI tool. In terms of AI, if the application or model will end up being used on behalf of the university to make a decision that directly affects an individual, then it must be a PIA-approved tool. That's the official wording. Also, if it's a locally hosted model that's intended to be made available as a service to internal or external parties. So this would be if a department at UBC or a certain member is trying to promote a model that isn't ChatGPT 4 or Mini or Copilot to other external parties, representative of UBC, saying that this is UBC's official model. It must be a PIA-approved tool. And then, of course, you want to make sure that those are just those are scenarios that are strong indicators of collection. But, the use of disclosure of personal information in any AI context is risky. And you want to make sure that you're not superseding the primary guidance around high and very high risk information and making sure that you're never sharing those with any AI tool. But for other use cases involving lower medium risk information, if the platform hasn't been reviewed as part of the PIA process, you are still free to use it in non-official university contexts, so not representative of UBC, but if you're using it to check your work, if you're using it to clean up your emails or clean up your documents, that's completely fine. Just make sure you're being aware that if you are using medium risk information, that any information that you disclose to any AI is considered public. So make sure you do not disclose information that should not be made public domain. So that's UBC Privacy Matters principles around AI. So pretty strict when it comes to the type of information. And UBC has also released more guidance from the CTLT team. So the Center for Teaching and Learning Technology has released another website called GenAI.ubc.com, and it's basically a hub for a bunch of principles and a bunch of standards, including UBC Privacy Matters tools, that has a bunch of resources that are super useful, and that will be in the link below. That will be a really helpful resource if you're ever looking to get more research on UBC's official stance and guidance on UBC on AI tools. But UBC's GenAI guidance principles, which is a list of around, I think, 13 principles that UBC's CTLT team has released, are very helpful when it comes to navigating using AI, specifically from a security and from an interactive standpoint, which, Bremen, you're going to talk about in a bit. So from a security standpoint, I've pulled a few of these points out that I found really useful. So you want to make sure you're using discretion even with publicly available personal information. And you want to make sure that, again, if the data seems ambiguous, you're erring on the side of caution. You also want to be mindful of the training settings for LLMs. I mentioned this earlier, but you want to be making sure that you know where your data is being stored. We advise turning off your browser cache and clearing your cookies as often as possible. And we also encourage that you read through the click-through agreement when you register for an LLM tool. Without a UBC PIA-approved tool, you want to check the privacy information. You want to consider the security of the tool, your own understanding of the tool. You also want to make sure that you're using it responsibly and you're being accountable for the results. So when it comes to using these tools, accountability is the biggest thing. And you can't be accountable if you're not knowledgeable of the tool. So an example of a situation in which you might use ChatGPT and it could pose a security risk would be this email here. So if you take a minute to read through the email, you can see that it's a copy-pasted email on a list of candidates that have been shortlisted for a work-learn position. And it's an email from me to you just talking about a lot of, information about these candidates. And right off the bat, if I pasted this into ChatGPT and asked it for grammar, I might think this is an innocent, I'm just asking it to clean up my wording, my phrasing, so that, I can look good to my boss. But
so, and if someone was feeling unsure at this point, like, I'm not sure if this is like information that I can put in there, they can turn to that table, maybe the one that you shared with us. Yeah. So to see what would be low and medium.
Exactly. And you might, and if you remember earlier, you want to make sure that you're only sharing low and medium risk information. And here there's a few examples of, like you mentioned, that high risk information. So
and maybe something that the audience could do right now is pause the video before we reveal what would be, problematic, and see.
Can you find all of them?
Identify what might be an issue here.
I think it's worth it to give that a practice and then, have that reflective mindset in your head so that the next time you see that blank text box that says, ask me anything, there's a moment of pause, like, wasn't there that guideline? Wasn't there that time
Exactly.
Because more conscious, more aware.
Yeah, so imagine you're about to put something into ChatGPT and you're taking that crucial minute to really think about what you're inputting into that text box there. All right, so if you've looked through the email, you might have noticed that there are a few key points that are deemed security risks. So, of course, we have the names of the students that have been accepted for the position. Names are considered high risk. We have their location, domestic, international. That's considered private information. Their CWLs, including the usernames, is also considered high risk information. And also, if you caught this, their grade point is mentioned. Interested in education have above a 90% average. This is actually deemed high risk information because students' grades are protected. Also, something that could be deemed a security risk, technically medium risk information since it is publicly available. But in my email signature there, I have my email and I have the UBC phone number and all of my personal work information. This is publicly available. However, if you are feeding a bunch of it into ChatGPT, you want to be careful in the context in which you're feeding it. And maybe think twice about copy pasting the entire email signature. And then lastly, there is also the information that these students are being accepted for the position. And the internal knowledge of that is also private. So you want to make sure that even the sentiment of this email, even though it seems innocent, the sentiment of this email is private. So you want to make sure that you're censoring or removing these private things before you send it over to ChatGPT to have it look over it.
So I have a question. There, in that case, my name was not highlighted. So it seems like putting just a first name should be okay. But what about like the context?
Exactly.
If it understands the connections,
Depends on the person,
might be
right?
problematic.
In your
right?
case, like your name as a staff member.
Exactly, yes. So faculty and staff names are
I
considered
really like
medium
this
risk
graphic,
information because they're
and
publicly
we're going to be
available
sharing
on the
that
UBC
so
website.
people can download
Student
it,
names,
access
however,
it.
are
And
not.
what was it
So
based, like
it
the
is,
information?
if it's a
It was
student's
from
name,
somewhere, right?
yes, so
yeah. And what would be the recommendation if someone see these problems? Can they use other like names, or should just not use AI at all? What would be
You
the
can
right
just
approach?
put underscores. Like
Maybe that would be one approach. Yeah.
the AI understands that.
Exactly. Or you could do what I did here and make up names like John Doe, Jane Smith, or any, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, so I hope you got a little bit out of that. And now you might think twice about privacy before you dive in and just send information over to an AI LLM. So when it comes to their guidance on the use of AI and the effectiveness of the use of AI, we've created a little framework for you that has 6 important considerations before you use AI for work. So you want to consider, is it secure? So this is something that I've been talking about, and you want to make sure, all right, is it UBC PIA approved? If not, have I read over the terms of service? Have I looked at the privacy policy? Do I know if it's not secure, making sure that the data you put in is not sensitive? Are you knowledgeable? This ties into that. You want to make sure that you know the pros and cons of using the tool. You want to be knowledgeable about the bias, which is something that we're not going to get into, but something that you can look at and we're going to talk about later. You want to be knowledgeable about all aspects of the tool. Then you want to ask, is it relevant? So how should I be using this tool? How should I be prompting it? And Bremen, you're going to talk about that. And then, is it fair and accurate? Is the data I'm getting back correct? Could it be wrong? And again, Bremen's going to talk about conversing with AI. And then lastly, are you accountable? And is it transparent? And these kind of go together. So are you accountable for the possible mistakes? Are you willing to take accountability for the possible mistakes that AI makes? And I know, Eduardo, you cited that something around 50% of people cited making mistakes with AI, right? And at the end of the day, that's your fault. That's your accountability in the workplace, right? So you want to make sure you're willing to take accountability, and you want to make sure you're definitely not one of those 30% of people who lies about using ChatGPT. Or 40, yeah, right. Yeah, you want to make sure that you are taking accountability and then being transparent. And I think that this is a big one that is missing in the workplace right now. But when you're using AI, transparency is key. You want to tell your coworkers, your employers, when you're using it, where you're using it. And especially if you're publishing something that has that AI has been used at all, you want to make sure you're citing the use of that. If it's going to be published in a website or something like a memo, you want to make sure you're citing the use of AI. This doesn't include grammar correction and small things, but when it comes to large generative things like images, it does.
Yeah, I really like this graphic. And we're going to be sharing that so people can download it, access it. And what was it based, like the information? It was from somewhere, right?
Yes, so we've boiled down information from UBC's GenAI website, UBC Privacy Matters guidelines, and also the Government of Canada's FASTER, FASTER framework, which is the Government of Canada's own regulations around generative AI. That framework will also be linked in the link below if you are interested in looking at guidance that isn't centered around education, but more general use when it comes to protecting the nation's security and privacy.
Great. Fantastic.
For sure. Okay, so I think there's probably some questions now that we've gone over that guideline with the 6 sort of considerations. We've only really covered security, we've covered some accountability for privacy stuff, but now there's all these questions swirling around regarding how to make your AI use more relevant, more fair, more accurate. And so that's what we're going to try and get into here. And I think that we'll start with another example that's very similar to the privacy issue in that email before, but now we might be running into some accuracy issues. So this email that you should be seeing now, this is something that is actually generated by, I believe it was Copilot, or was it ChatGPT? Yeah, so Copilot. So, privacy impact assessed, UBC approves it. That doesn't free it from accuracy issues. And so in this case, we've prompted it with a simple question. Just click on Copilot, get in there, and hey, make me an email about how we need a water cooler from one of our other units. Well, you haven't really taken the time to develop a prompt here or develop your question and provide context. And so if you take a quick look at this, maybe pause and read through it, you'll see that there's some issues where Copilot has come up with things, inferred things that we didn't necessarily want it to. And so if we just copy paste this and send the email off, then we're going to run into trouble because we've just asked the other unit for something we didn't need. So in this case, we asked that we only need the water cooler temporarily. We didn't put that in our prompt.
It mentions a short event happening.
Yeah, a
in
short
our
event.
space.
Where did that come from? That's just
Making up stuff.
Making stuff up. Yeah. And of course, then the email signature.
Yes. Yeah, the email signature doesn't even comply with the UBC email signature guidelines, right?
So don't, get your email signature from Copilot. It doesn't have the context. And so this kind of provides a good example of the kind of mistakes. And, as Eduardo mentioned, there's a lot of these types of mistakes being made. It may sound silly, but, it's so convenient. It feels so easy, and it makes so much text in just a few seconds. It's very easy to get lulled into a sense of, almost false accuracy and just being impressed. And I think it's really important to take a step back. And so the first thing I want to talk about regarding relevancy, accuracy, is just being selective about when you use AI in the first place. So, even before you open up Copilot, there should be questions about, why am I turning to this? And is it going to be useful to me in this situation? And there's no 100% one-size-fits-all answer to that question. It really comes down to your question. Are you just hastily turning to it because, you've become sort of reliant on it to answer simple questions? In that case, you have to consider if you're potentially de-skilling yourself. So the question here is, if this was something that you would normally do, you're now offloading that task onto the AI. And if you repeatedly do this, you no longer have the skill to do that thing. So in the future, you may end up slowing yourself down because you have to turn to the AI to answer the question instead of having it top of mind. And this is something that has already been documented scientifically in psychology research regarding Google, where, people, when they turn to Google something, they actually then perform worse on retrieval tests regarding that information. And there's been more research done following up on that, comparing it to AI, and it's even more of a loss if you're using AI compared to Google. So
right.
It's one of these
It's almost
things
like you retain no less information. Right.
Yeah, and the theory is that your brain is sort of storing the information that I can look at ChatGPT instead of storing the information, the actual answer to your question.
Yeah. So you lose an ability.
Yeah, you're essentially losing that ability. And then the other possibility is when you're turning and you're hastily prompting, you're just, send me an email about this and generate this or that. You're also not giving enough context. So the answer it gives might be bad. So you can kind of have a compounding issue here where you rely on it, but now it's giving you, this email that has mistakes in it. And, it has been so long since you actually drafted an email yourself and you're lazy about it because you've come to use.
Or just by not providing the context, then you need to reprompt and prompt again and prompt again. And then
Yes. Yeah. So let's say it generated you this email regarding the water cooler. Now you have to say, no, there's no event going on. And also we need it permanently. Can you draft an email regarding that? And then, okay. Oh, and also the email signatures, it's not like that. It needs to have this. And at a certain point, you run into what we've been calling the productivity paradox.
Right. Why wouldn't you just fix the email signature yourself?
Exactly. It's like, it feels like it's very, convenient to do things through the AI. but you may be sort of walking in circles. And I've got a little graphic here that I think illustrates that, where it's this illusion of improvement and productivity. But in reality, you are walking in circles, reprompting, trying to fix the AI's work instead of just doing something yourself that might be more effective, or perhaps reflecting and formulating a problem that you can put to the AI in a really effective manner.
Yeah. That's very interesting, because I think the way people sell AI is saying that it's going to make you more productive. That's kind of like the main argument always.
Yeah.
But we're seeing these cases in which that's not true.
Yeah, it's actually slowing you down potentially to use it in this sort of hasty or unintentional way, I guess.
So what are the ways that I can be intentional? Like, how do I get the most out of the use of AI?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think one sort of buzzword that's been going around is prompt engineering. And there's this idea that maybe if I just find the magic words, if I just use the right vocabulary and the right grammar, I can hack the AI to 10x my productivity. But what we're seeing is that actually, in a lot of cases, the AI is better at coming up with prompt vocabulary, and more the AI is getting stronger and stronger, so that you don't need that prompt vocabulary or prompt engineering. It can still be useful. It's still a tool to understand a little bit. And we talk about knowledgeability. It's really important. And it's worth looking into to some extent. But you can't put all your eggs in one basket and just hope that if you use the magic words, there are no magic words. So a better answer to your question more has to do with coming up with a problem and following a guideline for how to present that to the AI. Right. And so I think, we've come up with a basic sort of model for that. But the real important thing is just taking the time. So I'll give that example of our model. We call it the Create model. And it's adopted from a few different resources. But it starts with essentially asking the AI to take on a persona. We call it a character. And that really just is giving it a starting context. So, in this case, I've just started with a simple prompt where we want the AI to act as a children's writer. And then we give it the request. So we've already given some context before we jump into our request, right?
We give them a persona.
Right. You're telling the AI to act as something.
That's right. Yeah. And so it's already, started with that. That's its initial thing. And then the request comes in. So in this case, you're writing a short creative story. Then we need to give some examples. That adds even more context. So maybe it's like Dr. Seuss. We add some additions. We want, this detail and that detail regarding the story, and then the type of the output extra. So you see how we're adding all of these things together.
Specifying the output, specifying the extras, also the examples. So you're saying like maybe comparing it to things that are concrete and that the AI knows about will make it better.
Yeah, because if you don't provide examples, it really is just pulling statistically from whatever seems most closely connected to creative, captivating stories, which isn't necessarily what you're looking for. Like, you hopefully have some vision in your mind of what you're looking for from this interaction, right? And so if you're just saying, create me a captivating story, it's actually pulling you in a direction, sort of making decisions for you that may not be what you're looking for.
And also with this, it seems like you can escape the paradox that you were mentioning if you're very careful and detailed.
Yeah, because in this case, you don't have to necessarily reprompt. You don't have to continuously, go down, an avenue of like, this seems like the right answer, and then later find out, okay, but I don't like this part and I don't like this part, and find yourself having to restart from square one.
Right. It's like the mega prompt to prevent the reprompting. Yeah.
And that's even good for the environment as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's another thing. We're not going to talk too much about it on this podcast, but as you may know, there's a considerable environmental impact of AI, and limiting the number of prompts you have to use is really a beneficial thing you can do. And I think, honestly, there's even better ways to do it than just this prompt that I've laid out using this model. This is a good starting place, but I'm hoping we can display what Copilot actually presents as a result when you put this prompt in. And if you're looking through it right now, it really just spits out a story for you. And, it might be more targeted than if you just said, write me a story, but we can do a lot better, actually. And that comes down to a few more tips that I'm going to go through and kind of try and apply those tips, but still using that guideline that I laid out. So the first tip, and this is something we were already talking a lot about, is giving like a ton of context. So instead of just saying, when you're providing the character, become, a writer, we want there to be, as you can see here, an interest in stories about sustainability and collaboration. This is the kind of thing that maybe I'm interested in. So I'm going to put that persona on ChatGPT when I'm asking it to help me with something, right? And, somebody who knows that their target audience is 3 to 5, like that's another piece of context, right? And then also just being really, really clear about your main objective, because in the previous one, we just said short, creative story. Like, okay, there's still some vagueness around what is that story? What is the story about? What is the moral of the story? We don't know that. So we can add all of those details in too, right?
That gives you more agency too. You're making more decisions. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You think about it.
Yeah, because in the case where you're just saying a creative, captivating story, you're leaving the vagueness to be explained by the AI.
Right. It's almost putting you in the driver's seat.
Yeah, you want to put yourself in the driver's seat, and then you can be more productive because you're really getting at what you wanted.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it can also be interesting to see what AI comes up with, but I think we also want to retain our agency.
Yeah, and I mean, even with a mega prompt like this, AI is still doing a lot of pulling stuff out of hats, right? Like, so yeah, it's still that sort of spark that people are looking for from AI to some extent is still happening. And as you'll see when we actually show what this prompt generates, because the next tip I was going to get to is breaking the problem up into subproblems. And this is kind of like advanced examples where you're asking for, can you get me like short and long sentence structures? Can you give me, and this is really key, a description of all the characters, a description of the plot line. Tell me why these characters are, relatable to 3 to 5-year-olds. Because then when you prompt this, you'll get the story, but you also get all this extra information. And then you can use what the AI has generated as jumping off points for your own, whatever you're trying to do, right?
You're having it do the world building for you.
Yeah, it's doing some world building, and then you can jump in there and it's like, oh, I like this part of it. I like this part of it. You're not just taking it whole scale and kind of copy pasting.
Yeah.
Interesting. It seems to me that in that process, there's some learning happening as well, because it creates the information and then you can start to make those associations of what does it mean to me? What does it mean to me? Yeah,
exactly. You're putting yourself even more in the driver's seat when you're reflecting on the answer it gave you.
Yeah. So it's a learning experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And then this is a super key one, which is asking the AI to sort of reframe the problem. I haven't done that super highly in this prompt, but I mean, to some extent, asking it for that plot line and those characters, that essentially allows you to reframe the problem. Because let's say it generates you a story and you're like, wait a minute, these characters actually work better in a story about this, which is something I also want to talk about. So maybe I actually want to focus more on this aspect. And that's the kind of thing where if you don't include any possibility for reframing a problem, you might end up hitting something I like to call like a local maximum, where it's like, well, with what information you gave, this is the best possible thing the AI could have given. But if you allowed it to also say, well, it could be, about sustainability, but maybe it's also about collaboration. Now you can push beyond a local maximum to something that's like even better, right. But it wouldn't ever come out of that initial sort of prompt where it's just asking about something limited.
Exactly. Interesting.
But notably, all of these things that I'm suggesting and writing this big, massive prompt, it takes a lot of work. And I think that if you're going to take away one thing, it's really that working with AI should also be effortful.
Right.
It shouldn't.
You want to make sure that you're really putting in the effort to make sure you're getting out what you put in.
And that's how you're going to make sure that it's relevant. You're going to make sure that it's accurate. And you're going to, check for those biases, right? Because you actually have some of the black box revealed when you ask for, breaking it into subproblems, when you provide more examples, when you give more context. You can see a little bit more what it's doing. You can get a little closer view of, okay, is this actually, am I going to feel okay if I were to publish this information? Is this moral of this story actually aligned with my values? That's the kind of thing when we talk about accountability, when we talk about transparency. And I think you're probably going to be a lot more likely to go to your boss with it if you know that you've put in this effort.
I know.
You feel a lot less guilty,
This whole framework, this framework just gives me this newfound confidence. Like sometimes, when I stare at that blank box, it's so easy to type in one sentence and then get something that I deem unusable or grapple with AI back and forth. But I feel like this gives me almost more power, and having this framework really is gonna help me.
Yeah, and I think in this case we're developing a skill actually.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like escape that problem of de-skilling. So we actually grow.
Yeah.
And that's what is needed in the future with AI. People do need to get the skill of
Skill
how
of,
to
like,
interact with AI.
Problem formulation skill, reflection skill, the critical analysis of the result. And that's all. It feels like you're walking up the stairs, but remember that just because you're front loading that effort in the prompting and the analysis, it's a lot better than fighting with the AI over and over, which is also effort and it's not fun.
Yeah, because that can get you nowhere.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a good way to escape that paradox. And if you combine that with the privacy, concerns, you're reflecting on those things, you're reflecting on accuracy. I think you're going to be improving your AI interactions by a lot.
Wow.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys. This is all that we have for the episode, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So thank you for joining us. We'll have more episodes on AI that's coming up. Remember to check the links. Remember to subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.